So I had somebody the other day ask me, what are the repercussions of certain injuries? Like, how does it affect your training, and what should you do about it? And you know, this is obviously a complex question because there's many types of injuries and many types of things that happen. But honestly, there's a lot of people that are teenagers out here watching YouTube for fitness channels, and you know, early 20s and even late 20s. And they, you know, think they have it all figured out because, you know, they're training, they're gaining muscle mass and all that sort of thing. But honestly, you really don't know shit until you've had a real injury and you start to see the limitations of the body. Okay, like you know, I lifted heavy and was, you know, doing really well with bodybuilding and stuff until, of course, I dislocated my shoulder in hockey. And I talk about this all the time, whatever, because it seems like I can't get people to actually watch all the videos. They'll watch one video and then want the whole story in every single video. So the bottom line is, how does an injury affect your training? Well, injury will affect your training in a lot of different ways. First, it will affect your range of motion. And anybody that tells you that it won't affect your range of motion has not had an injury, not the type of injury I'm talking about. So, for instance, with a dislocating shoulder, there are varying degrees of injury in a dislocation, right? Sometimes the ligaments just stretch and the labrum itself, like the ball and socket, it's like a golf tee. This is like a golf tee. This is where the ball and socket sits in. And sometimes it's not torn. It just dislocates, stretches, the ligaments stretch, and then it goes back into the joint. And you could do something called prolotherapy, which will actually help tighten the joint up, and it'll be fine. It'll still stay stable, and you won't dislocate it ever again. If you, of course, don't dislocate it for a certain period of time, it'll tighten up and everything is fine. But under most conditions, what happens is that there's something called a Bankart lesion, which means there's a tear in the golf tee. So what happens is the joint can slip out at any time, okay? So if you have a real bad tear like I do, there's a Bankart lesion and there's a slap tear. So it can go at the top or the bottom, okay? So that's an extreme case, right? Now, over time, sometimes your shoulder will stabilize a little bit if the labrum itself heals a bit. But what happens at that point is now your muscles have to do twice the work in order to stabilize the joint. Okay, so now the muscles are actually keeping the joint in there. So now a lot of your actual power is actually being used to stabilize instead of just push. So you might be pushing a certain amount of weight on the bench, but somebody will be like, oh, wow, that's not that much weight. But really, you're actually pushing 20, 30% more weight than they're pushing, because that's how much force has to be involved in the muscle interaction, because there's a lot more instability going on, right? I guess it's equivalent to you standing on a trampoline and lifting a bar over your head. You know, it's kind of like that. There's a lot more instability. So that's how a dislocation can affect your training. What will happen is, because the joint is actually not right anymore, what happened to your shoulder after my dislocation, it actually sat downwards. So it totally changed my groove on my bench. So I had to reteach my bench press as far as, where's my groove, so that perfect groove that, that you get that groove there and your shoulders are back and everything, that totally went out the door. Everything changed. Now, with a tear, if you have a muscle tear, which is what I have on my left shoulder because the chiropractor yanked my arm and did the, whatever number on me. But what happened with the bicep tear is now, because the bicep actually crosses the shoulder, it actually helps stabilize the shoulder. So it helps keep it tighten the joint, right? So once the bicep is torn, now the shoulder will sit a little bit different. So my left shoulder sits a little bit more forward. And now what happens is, because the bicep's not stabilizing the joint, now the rotator cuff and the delt has to stabilize the joint a little bit more than before, So I'm still training, not a big deal, but it has shifted. So now I've got, this kind of thing going on. When I bench, it's like a different shift. And some people say, oh yeah, just correct your form. All this. You don't do it. It's kind of like if you have a puppet and you cut a string and you attach the string to a different part and you move, say the string was attached here before, now it's attached here, it's going to change the way the muscle moves. So I've got a wicked jab with my left arm now. My left jab is so strong, it's like bang, I can snap it out. But the fact is that there's not as much strength on this range of motion here. Like say a preacher curl is gone, because my bicep is now connecting farther up on the forearm, not as far down. So it has changed that. So what you'll notice is that your torque curves and your strength curves will change in the joints, and that will also affect your overall groove and how you move in the compound movement. So you have to relearn that and retrain that, And then there are some people say, oh yeah, why don't you do surgery and this and that? Well, some things can't be surgically repaired. Like once a muscle is torn and then you go to repair it, it's not always actually that simple. Sometimes you can't actually do it unless you repair the muscle within a period of 1 or 2 weeks of the injury. And with a labral tear, if you actually get a labral tear in your hip or your shoulder, what you'll have to do is get a surgery to repair the labrum, and in some cases it still doesn't repair it. You'll go through 6 months of not being allowed to use your arm for anything, lifting, especially any sport of any kind. And then at the end of it, you know, you pray and hope that it moves properly. But whenever, you know, a surgeon gets in there and starts gluing things together, you're not really sure if it's going to turn out perfect, you know. So but anyway, that's why I haven't done surgery. I just work around it and train through it, and there you go. Now there are back injuries too, like there are people that herniate discs, and you know, sometimes you herniate a disc, or somebody you know, tweaks a ligament in the lower back and their back will sit different, and you know, they'll start squatting sideways, and you know, the hamstrings and the hips will start to compensate. You know, these are all things that happen, and they're all things to consider when you train. And you know, the best thing to do is to listen to what your body's doing at the time. And you know, the worst thing you can do is say, oh, I'm going to do maximal weight right now even though my body feels like shit, right? So really, that's what this channel is about. It's about basically getting you to listen to these things. So how does an injury affect your body? Well, it depends on the injury. So I hope this helps you understand a little bit, you know, about how some of the injuries I've had have affected my groove. But ultimately, you can still train anyway. You just got to always listen to your body and cater your exercises according to what your body's telling you, not do them according to, oh, that person can do it this way, so I should be able to do it. Well, you guys have both had a different history. You may have different injuries, different types of tweaks and things than the other person, and so you have to change your form accordingly as well. Yeah. So I hope that helps, and take care for now.